So welcome to this meeting of the Regional Strategic Leadership Committee, and a special welcome to Coulter, Chairman of the Youth Rōpū, and Alice. So it's nice to see you on board. And our wee chat that we had, Coulter said he's not afraid of the hard questions. And also Matt, I can see you there too, so welcome Matt. Before we start, Timatanga Cramwell to do Mihi, and then followed by Councillor Pauling to do a Karakia. Thank you.
I think it's Councillor Farm.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Farm. Sorry.
Tēnā koe e kau ko rako, hoa atu te rako kōrero I tēnei wā nō reira, te rangatira tēnā koe. E ua tāheke, I runga I aku roi mata mō hau e hika e te papa e moana. Huti e te rawanga kura o te pāreka o parau ariki, o tama te ariki nui, e te rau kōtuku, e te kurutanga rere wā, ho atu rā koe ki te Rōpū hau e taka ana I te raki e. Waiho mā mātou e waiho tanga te waka o te mana motu haka, e hoi I runga e te ara ku pāringahia e koe moana he. Tēnei te mi atu ki a koe te rakitera, haere atu rā moi mai, hoki mai. Hapti no tātai hono rātou kia rātou. Tātou kia tātou I tēnei wā nō reira tēnā koutou. Kia koutou I hara mai te Rōpū. Rakatai tai ohoi, mo te kaunihere nei nō reira nau mai hara mai. E kōrua, Coulter, Alice, tēnā kōrua hara mai. I tēnei wā ki te kōrero hia kia mātou I tēnei wā, I tēnei rā pauri nā te me wahi atu I te rangatira a Moana Jackson I tēnei rā nō reira kia kōrua hara mai. Kia koe hoki Matt, pai ki kitea I tō konohi, mene ki runga tēnei hui topa I te wānei. Koutou mā, everyone, just acknowledging the loss of a great man today, Moana Jackson. He has done a lot for our bicultural country, to making sure we never forget, understanding te tiriti, not only for ngai Māori, but also for Aotearoa. And I just acknowledge Moana Jackson and his loss to us all, and as he sleeps his long sleep, and just acknowledging his work, not only in the law space, but also in the education system throughout Aotearoa. Nō reira, e te rakatira moi mai, oki mai. Ko hoa atu te rākau kōrero kia Councillor Farm, nāna I tuku Karakia I tēnei rā, nō reira tēnā koutou, a tēnā tata katoa. Mauri ora.
Kia ora, Timatanga Cranwell. Ko whakatakati hau te Karakia, tā kina te Karakia. Whakatakati hau ki te uru, whakatakati hau ki te tonga. Kia aroha mai. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E heake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhau, ti hei, mauri ora.
Mauri ora. Kia ora lā, tēnā koe.
Thank you very much for those, for your mihi and your mention of Moana Jackson. Great loss, and I agree. And thank you, Lan, for the karakia. Just to remind everyone that we're in this hybrid model that we're operating under COVID-19 restrictions. And for the members that are using this online, please use the chat function to speak or question. Put your hand up actually would be easiest. And when we get to recommendations, silence will be taken as affirmation of that. Moving to apologies, we have 3 apologies. One from Councillor Ian McKenzie, one from Councillor Apanui, and the other from Councillor Hands, and Councillor Hands apologising because of bandwidth. She can't make it because of bandwidth, so yeah, that's unfortunate. Item 3, conflicts of interest. I don't think there are any conflicts of interest. Public forums and deputations, there are none. Extraordinary and urgent business, there is none. We have no notices of motion, so if we can move to the minutes from the previous meeting on page 8 of your agenda. Are there any matters of accuracy that need to be attended to in those minutes? Okay, then I would ask for a mover that the Regional and Strategic Leadership Committee confirms minutes of the Regional Committee held on the 17th of February 2022. Would someone like to move that? Let's put a hand up, maybe. Councillor Edge, seconded by Councillor Marsha. All those in favour? Anybody against? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we're just moving on now to 8.1 report items. Now, these portfolio committee items will be introduced by Catherine Short. So I'll hand to you, Catherine, and Catherine, you will run through this. We will do questions after each item, and then you can hand back to me when you're finished, Catherine. So thank you.
Great, thanks. Tēnā koutou katoa. This is the report, as Peter mentioned, on page 14 of the agenda, and as you will note from that, it's the second quarter report for the year. I will note that the third quarter report we're producing in a more streamlined manner, and that will be coming through to the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee on both the April the 28th and then to the Regional Strategic Leadership on the May the 12th. So you'll be getting the next quarterly update in a much more timely manner than this one. I will also note that shortly you'll be getting an 8+4 forecast from a financial perspective. So obviously, because this is a second quarter report, the finances in it go up to the end of December, but you will be getting an 8+4 forecast discussion for long. Also, I'd just like to note that we're, as an executive, we're having a look at the risks reporting throughout the whole of our council structure, so that you'll get we're working on providing a much more streamlined and consistent approach to the risk reporting. So what I'd like to do is invite each of the directors in turn with responsibility for the portfolios to briefly talk to the portfolio and then answer any questions of clarification from councillors. So the first one is Tim with the Water and Land portfolio.
Kia ora, Catherine, kia ora, Chair, and tēnā koutou katoa. Yes, very happy to present the Water and Land Portfolio Report. As Catherine's mentioned, of course, this is up until December, so there are a couple of things in it that seem a little dated, particularly when it talks about the summer monitoring is underway and things like that, when obviously it has now finished. But I won't go through each of the 6 programs. There are the 6 programs that sit under the portfolio listed around working together for healthy water and land, monitoring and understanding our environment, freshwater regulatory framework, healthy waterways action, stewardship of water and land, freshwater resilience. Those are the programs of work. I'm not going to go through the highlights of each of them, but I do just want to pull out 2 particular highlights that I think are important to mention, one being Rōpū Whakamutunga, the Ashburton Lakes, and just to highlight that there has been considerable action, and of course it has continued since this December, but there has been a considerable amount of action on the ground, working with farmers, more monitoring, and particularly, I guess I want to highlight the partnership approach that we've had with the 3 Te Kurunanga that are involved in that area. So just want to highlight that. And then the second one is the resumption of the Farm Environment Plan audits as being an important piece of work. This is obviously just pointing out that it got delayed because of the overseer report that came through, and those have now resumed, and that's a significant piece of work that is happening, and it's just highlighting that that's there. The last thing I just wanted to discuss was under the levels of service and the key portfolio initiatives. So I'm looking at page 26 of the agenda. I just want to explain a little thing about the levels of service under 4 and 5, which you'll see are showing as at risk in Q2. And then the key portfolio initiative, the very first one, Ngāi Tahu Partnership, that shows as green, and it appears as though there is a bit of a disjunct between those 2, but that's not actually the case. So I'll just quickly explain why that is. What the key portfolio initiative is about the relationship, the way we're working together. And that's moved from an orange to a green because of the significant advances that have been had in the Manatu Manahuis and the relationship and the way that we're working together has come under a green status. The levels of service 4 and 5 are less to do with the partnership, but actually to do with the amending the regulatory framework and the model that's being used. So that's saying that we still haven't got to that, and there is still a risk, particularly around how that, the timeframes. So it's not about the relationship, it's actually about the work that's being done under that relationship. So just if those two appear not quite lining up. And happy to leave it now for questions, Chair.
Thanks, Tim. And I'll go to Nicole in a second, but I just wanted to say, Alison Coulter, if you've got questions, please feel free to ask them as well, and by raising your hand, and I'll see it in the chat. So, Nicole.
Kia ora, Catherine. I've got 2 questions through you, Tim. On page 9 of the second quarter report, or 26 of 56 on the agenda papers, key portfolio initiatives, freshwater regulatory framework, both are at risk. I'm just wanting if you could expand on that a wee bit. It's not captured in text.
Yes, through you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Marshall. So this is linked into I was saying about levels of service 4 and 5, and this is actually no, sorry. Let me just read it, and I'll just check. Hang on.
No, that's fine. I do have a second question under that, if it's easier to ask the second one while you think of an answer.
No, I've got it. I just wanted to check that it was the one I was thinking of rather than the one below it. So, look, this is to do with the timeframes and the fact that, yes, we've got our relationship lined up, but we still haven't got the model that we will be using for, exactly how we're going to deliver on a freshwater plan and what level of advice is required. So we do have concerns, particularly about the timetable that we've set out, and that's why it is remaining at risk. So that's what I was saying a bit earlier, that it's not the relationship side of it, it's actually about the on the ground, the delivery of a plan.
So for the next quarter report, I'd like an update on that, if there could be something explicit, because that's a really significant piece of work for us. So if we can capture that a bit more explicitly, I think that would be really awesome. My second question is just on the following page under expenditure. It says that work on an economic model to support the planning work has been delayed and is being rescoped in-house. Can you please advise what's happening with that?
Yes, thank you. So just to be clear, when it says rescoped in-house, that doesn't mean delivering the model in-house. That's the rescoping is happening in-house.
So just after some explanation why we're rescoping it. Is it because of COVID? Is it because of other factors? Just getting some more information around that.
No, it's actually, no, thank you. It's there was some work that was scoped out around some economic modelling, and it was talked with, in this case, it was Lincoln University as to being a deliverer of that. And then it was realised that it was not going to be able to deliver fully what we required around, particularly about thinking about ecosystem services and the wholeness of what was required, and that the modelling was too narrow, and therefore it needed to be rescoped and thought again, particularly also in light of the way of working and not wanting to jump too quickly into an approach that perhaps was a little bit narrow and would not fit so well with the Te Mana o Te Wai approach and some of the wider thinking. So that's why it is being rescoped.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Tim. That's a great answer. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor McKenzie. Elizabeth.
Yep. Hi, Tim. I've just got 2 questions. So my first question is in relation to level of service 9. and that's page 26 of 56 or page 9 of the agenda. And it's coded as at risk. And I just wanted to delve into, I'd like a bit more detail on that. If I sort of read a bit further down, I see that there are sort of delays with agreements with the runanga and that sort of thing. But yeah, what's kind of holding this up? Is it the sort of transition from the overseer to the new model that we're using, or what's sort of the
Yes, thank you, and through you, Chair. This is specifically to do with the overseer issue, and again, it's hard for me to remember, but this is talking about December. So but even under the current, for our next reporting, it will also be at risk to deliver the level of service around good management practice, and it's to do with the fact that we had to delay the auditing. Means that we won't be able to get the number of audits done that are set in the level of service. It doesn't mean we're not doing it. It's just that we are behind and we won't be able to deliver fully, we believe, the amount required in the level of service. So it is very much tied in with the overseer and the fact that we had to delay the audits.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a sort of staff and capacity issue. And yeah.
And external auditors. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So my second question is in relation to the key portfolio initiative on the same page, and it's the Healthy Waterways Action, the Mahinga Kai implementation. And I noticed that for status quarter 2, there's an at risk. But my question, I guess, around this, I'm kind of a bit mystified with Mahinga Kai. I'm not seeing sort of a significant investment in time and monitoring in the contaminant and ecotoxicological side of things. And for Mahinga Kai, in some areas there's a situation where you're only permitted to eat 1 fish per annum because the levels of pesticides and heavy metals are too high. Are our partners paying for the contaminant monitoring? Are we going to invest more in this area? How is this going to play out in the future?
Thank you, and again through you, Chair. Just in terms of explaining why that's gone from green to orange, that's actually to do with it's an alignment of the levels of service with the projects that are being proposed, and it's to do with the Canterbury Water Management Strategy projects that are coming through the work programs, but also how that aligns with this level of service. And there's actually an action at the next Te Pai Heringa meeting in May to just make sure that runanga are comfortable that these things are aligning. So that's why this has gone into orange, but that doesn't answer your question, which was more about the ecotoxicology side. It's not something that is part of this level of service. It's a very good question, and it's something that I think we should be considering. This is about the kind of on-the-ground projects to improve ecosystem health, so therefore there is a greater ability for Mahinga Kai. It's something that I think I'll take it away and consider it, and because I think it's a good question around some of the longer term toxicological issues that affect Mahinga Kai, not just habitat. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I think that has exhausted the questions. And so what I would like to do, Councillor Pauling.
Yeah, could I just have a follow-up to that, Tim? Is that going to be part of the work that I think Chanel is doing with the Mātauranga monitoring? I thought it might have been, but it would be good if we could link that together potentially.
Yes, I think that is something that is a good way of linking it, and I think so. There is a Mātauranga monitoring framework that's being delivered, or being developed, I should say, with Gail Tipper at the moment, and Chanel, Toms and the science group is closely involved in that. So yes, I think it is something that can be picked up as part of that.
Thank you.
Thanks. And now I will hand over to Catherine Harborough for the Biodiversity and Biosecurity report, which is on page 28 of 56. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you, and thank the Chair. So looking at the report, this quarterly report, still the levels of service are still on track. The couple of things that I'd like to draw your attention to in our programs work are the Greater River Revival section. In there is talk of the progress in the Rangiora Reach Master Plan, and it was to draw attention to that we actually are in the community at the moment on Have Your Say, where we are asking for some suggestions on how we can, and it's all online, so work we can do in that space. The other area I'd like to draw attention to is the Mirarako area. There was, in the paper, it talks about 140 hectares of Indigenous bush and wetlands. And so that site, Limestone Creek, and then the other 4 sites that are mentioned where we have been doing plant restoration. There is Haddock Downs, Emu Plains, and Countless Stream on the Mouse Point, which is one that we've been doing with Fonterra's Sustainable Catchment Fund. And the third area that I'd just like to draw your attention to is one of the, in the report, is the issues, which are on page 31. Page 31. So what has happened here is that there was a NES for freshwater, which restricted vegetation clearance, land disturbance, discharges and changes in hydrology in and around our natural wetlands. Now we have many natural wetland projects which would actually trigger then a resource consent being required. So MFE consulted in September 2001 on these proposed changes. And so we're just waiting to hear from the MFE what the impact from that consultation is and whether we need to undertake consent. So that's why it's been highlighted as an issue. I think that was all I wanted to draw your attention to.
Thanks, Catherine. Councillor Lan.
Kia ora, thanks, Catherine. Yeah, really looking forward to our briefing next week in which we can delve a bit more deeply into the Canterbury biodiversity strategy and actually more like biodiversity outcomes across the portfolio. But my specific question is just a further inquiry in the last point you just referred to about the NES potentially triggering resource consent requirements for Environment Canterbury. And it just made me think, yeah, where are we at with, because I know when we looked at our essentially compliance framework or consenting framework, we had a discussion about it in some forum last year, and we talked about the need to kind of look at our consenting requirements and how can they better like enable good people to be doing the right thing in biodiversity projects where they don't have onerous resource consent needs. And I know that it's a really difficult area to navigate, but we were specifically looking at that and we're going to be brought back some information. Is that right? Or can you jog my memory as to what was going on in that space?
Yeah, well, look, we obviously are looking at how we can manage these risks, this issue. I'm not sure, we'll have to come back to you as to when we come and report back, but yeah, I'll follow that up for you.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks. I've got Councillor Mackenzie, Elizabeth Piggott next.
Yep, I just have 2 questions. So my one is the wetland one, but from a sort of I guess I just want to know, so is it just Environment Canterbury, or should I say, for people doing wetland restoration, is it easier for farmers to actually get consent to do this than it is for us? Or are we just sort of at the same level of having to get consent, Catherine?
Yes, the same level as my understanding.
Okay. And so my second question is actually on that same page as the issues, which is page 31 of 56, which is page 14 of the agenda. The use of herbicides near waterways. I'm sort of wondering how much longer we are actually going to have the social license to keep using herbicides in waterways, or perhaps in the way that we're using them. And I'm just wondering, do we yet have a plan to start looking at perhaps modifying the way we use them and looking at other methods?
Thank you. And through the chair, yeah, look, herbicides is interesting because it's actually the critical tool to maintain the natural character of our rivers. And it's the biggest threat to our rivers, the weeds that are clogging up the rivers. So it's really difficult to, I guess, use alternatives on a large scale clearance. So, and also some particular weeds, it's not suitable to use anything but a herbicide. There are some herbaceous plants, I hear, like lupins, where we can use alternative choices, and we do trial those. But it is really difficult. It's reliant on the weather, on many factors. And what tends to happen is when we use those alternatives, that they come back. The weeds come back faster and bigger and quicker. So it quite often creates more work. So that's why herbicides are seen to be the most effective tool. So what we tend to do is we aim to use no more than we actually need to use, and we try to have the least environmental impact. So every site we are considering what are the choices we've got, and to try and mitigate that. And we are obviously in the process of looking to renew our consent, and in that we are advocating for the reduction of herbicide use in total from our use.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Councillor Pauling.
Yeah, kia ora, koutou. Not really a question, just really wanted to make a comment and just to acknowledge the work that's been put in around the biodiversity strategy, revitalisation, and of course the monitoring framework that is required in the future under the yet to be released national policy statement. But just to acknowledge that, and really looking forward, like Lan said, to our briefing in a couple of weeks to really delve into that, and just to acknowledge its importance, significance going forward. So thanks staff.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clearwater.
Thanks, Catherine, for the. My question was going to be in relation to the waterways too, and you've answered that already to Elizabeth. So thank you for that. I guess my comment now though would be that the risk that's outlined to us as a medium risk is clearly like a reputational risk for us if we don't have a good communications plan, and I understand that. But I just wonder, given that we need to look for other alternatives to the herbicide, is the impact of using herbicides near waterways not also a risk? And at what level should we be of risk should we be concerned about that?
Yeah, I guess it's just one of those. It's like sometimes with health and safety risks, there are sometimes some risks which we are mitigating as much as we can, but there will always be a risk. And yeah, we certainly try to communicate every time we are undertaking herbicide clearance, and we are, yeah, like I said, trying to use as minimal as possible and try to be really specific, using technology to make sure that we are just doing the fair way that we need to do.
Thanks, Catherine. And I guess the question around research into alternatives we can discuss at the future presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Coulter.
Apologies. Please let me know if this is inappropriate. I just wanted to quickly sort of chime in on this, just because I'm really interested in herbicide use globally and also the communication around that. I just wanted to, if you have any insight as to what the communications plan will be like, because I know it's in some ways kind of a 1080 situation where it's not a great tool, but it's the only tool we have. And yeah, there's a lot of stigma, and so I think it's, in terms of science communication, it's like a massive challenge, and I'm really curious to see what that will look like.
Do you want me to have a go at answering that through you, Chair? Just because the communications group is my group, Coulter, but and thank you for picking up on Catherine's invitation to ask a question, because I'd already said before, Catherine, to hold any questions till the EYR report, so it's good that you picked that up. Thank you. The communications plan generally is localised and is around really what we're doing. So, but you raise a really interesting point, and so did Councillor Mackenzie, around that social licence and how long we'll still have that for. And in terms of the communications needing to be a little bit broader in terms of explaining the why and that trade-off that we're making between the health of the river and the weeds versus the health of the river and the chemicals that are being used. And so it is something that's actually on the radar at the moment, to have a look at that broader social licence piece. I'll put it back to you too if you have any insights on that and any thoughts. We'd love to hear them, because it is going to be an ongoing conversation around how we maintain that social licence to keep using herbicides, and at what point are we going to have to start looking for alternatives. I don't know if that quite answered the question, but happy to take it offline and take some thoughts on it.
No, it absolutely did. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Coulter, and thanks, Teflon, for that. Councillor Southworth.
Yeah, I'm looking at page 31 of 56, 14, and under revenue, there's a comment that grant funding that we thought we were going to receive in the long-term plan, when it was then confirmed by MPI in September, was not as much as we were expecting, and that work has now been completed according to the funding received. And I'm just wondering the timing of that in terms of anticipating funds and then actually quite a substantial amount less being actually approved. Was there an ability to actually reassess the whole lot of what we'd originally identified for work, and then reprioritise? Or did we have a plan in place to anticipate that might happen and we'd already got prioritisation? Or did we end up in a situation where we perhaps didn't do the things we most would have wanted to do because of the way the information came through? So just interested, I understand this is potentially an issue that occurs in other portfolios as well. So I'd be interested to know, how do we anticipate, how do we work around those sorts of things? What happens if we get that bad news?
Yeah, so probably the easiest way is to explain it is when we get the bucket of money, it goes down into management units. So we would just not have as many management units if we had less money. So yeah, so you end up with less scope being able to achieve in this year. But obviously each year we renegotiate with MPI, we get another bucket of money. So it's very transactional in the process each month with MPI, confirming where we are with our progress, and they keep a very close eye on what we're spending in each management unit. So it just changes the scope of what we're doing each year.
So because there's less money though, then we must end up doing less work. So it's really, I guess my question is really, how do we prioritise? How do we make sure those things that are the highest priority for us get first dabs on the pot that comes through, rather than, just sort of reacting once it comes through? Like, is there a mechanism to ensure we're prioritising in anticipation of the fact that we may not get what we're hoping to get? That's really the question.
Yeah, we have effectively a backlog of which management unit is next, which one's next after that. So we know where the biggest, I guess, for the modern conifers, we know where the biggest spreading areas are. So we'll be targeting those first.
Great. So we can target what we most need to, even when we find we've got less funding coming through. That's great. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And if there's no more questions at this stage on B and B, I will move on to climate change and community resilience and invite, I think Tim's coming back for the climate change bit and Catherine will cover the community resilience. So Tim first, I think.
Kia ora, Catherine, and thank you. Look, I don't have anything in particular to say around the climate change. I would just highlight there the risk assessment that has been delivered and that has been reported through the Climate Change Action Committee as well. So I think what I'll do is I'll just hand straight on to Catherine and then happy to answer questions.
Great. If we take Catherine and then take questions on the whole portfolio, that'd be great.
Right. So I just wanted to draw attention to the levels of service. So 8 of them on track and 2 are at risk. So just on page 35 of 56, I just wanted to explain those at-risk items. So the number 23, the reason why that is at risk is because of the delay to the natural adaptation plan. That's expected in May, and so that really leaves us very little time to turn around to meet the level of service which said June. So obviously we'll be trying to do that as much as we can, and we are doing as much work around it beforehand. But until we actually see what that national adaptation plan is, it makes it really difficult to try and meet that level of service. And the other one, number 26, that relates to, the 23 also relates to, further down the page, it talks about key portfolio initiatives. And so that's where that further detail comes in around feeding into that national adaptation plan. So point 26, level of service 26, that relates to scheme reviews. And so look, we are a wee bit behind on those scheme reviews, and that's because we had a flood event and some of those same resources have been working on the flood recovery work. So we will be looking back to start on some of those scheme reviews shortly. And the only other thing I just wanted to draw your attention to was on page, page 34 of 56, where it talks about the report going to central government requesting permanent ongoing co-investment in flood protection. That is expected to be released next week and at our Natural Environment Committee. And that will be the first in the country to launch that report. So that's what I wanted to draw attention to.
Thanks, Catherine. I have a couple of questions, one from Councillor Farm.
Thank you, Catherine. Just generally would love a memo or something in terms of more information on the perpetual forestry project. I don't know if I've missed something, but I don't think I'd heard of that before, but it sounds really good. And the other question I had was just around the emissions reduction plan and noting that that'll be squeezing us in terms of time and communicating what's actually in there and what it means for our community. I was just wondering generally on that though, what is our expectation of what will actually come out from that? I mean, because I was kind of, had a few questions as part of the annual plan process about how we, in terms of our regional council role, will be responding to the emissions reduction plan. And I just realised I wasn't actually clear about it. So is it like really clear budgets that then we as a region would deliver as part of our planning processes, or what are we actually anticipating? And is central government talking to us about that, or is it going to be like a ta-da moment where it all gets revealed as part of the budget? Any comments on that?
I'll come in there, Catherine, if that's all right. In terms of the adaptation plan or the level of service, which it's partly to do with the way that the level of service has been written, which the level of service, and I've got it in front of me, says for this year, assess the implications of the National Adaptation Plan and the Emissions Reduction Plan on Environment Canterbury and the Canterbury region. So we're at risk of not meeting that because they haven't been released. So that's what that's about. But your question, Councillor Farm, I think at the moment we are still waiting to hear, and we really don't know what with that emissions reduction, and it is particularly around that emissions reduction, I think, that we don't know. I mean, it has been, it's always been at the national level, and then we have to think about what it means for us first as an organisation and then for the Canterbury region. But it's a very good question. I'm not aware that we have been involved in discussions, but that doesn't mean we haven't, and I'm just not aware of it. So I'll check with staff, but my understanding of it is at the moment that it is a little bit of we're waiting to see, and then we can assess it, because, yeah, I'm just not aware that, but it's a very good question and it's something for us to think about, whether we can get some kind of heads up or at least influence on what might be going.
Thank you.
Lan, it's Peter. Can I just clarify what you're talking about? Are you talking about transport emissions or just gross emissions?
Just the gross emissions in terms of the government's actual response to the Climate Commission's recommendations. So that's what will be in the emissions reduction plan.
Yeah.
But then I'm not sure how then it directly relates to how we can take the reins with that and actually deliver reductions for our region. But thanks for checking in on that, Tim.
I think Tim's given you a good answer. We're expecting something in transport, I think, in the next week and possibly next month. I think possibly we can cover that off in that transport area.
Thank you.
Back to you, Catherine. Sorry.
Great. I'm going to go to Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie.
Yep, I've just got two things. So I'm just assuming with the regional climate change risk assessment that even though it's coded red and high on this report, now that we've got it, that means it would kind of be coded green. So there's nothing further to worry about there. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so I'll go to my next question, which is just about the landfills. The vulnerable landfill sites, is it sort of a situation where it's a race against time? Do we, can this be fixed with more people, more funding, or, why is this sort of a high risk at present? Now that's in the same table.
Catherine, are you able to answer that? Unless au fait with that piece of work.
We might have to take that as an action to follow up.
Thank you. Elizabeth, we'll come back to you on that one. We've taken a notice. Was there a follow-up question as well? Is that okay?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Clearwater.
Thanks, Catherine. My question also relates to what's on page 35 of the agenda, and I guess it's around. Catherine referred before to that we are waiting, I gather, for the National Adaptation Plan. But I'm just wondering, do we really have to wait for that before, in fact, we address where it seems that, according to the tables under levels of service for both levels of service and the portfolio initiatives, there are risks. And like one, I guess the one you referred to, Catherine, was awareness of how the community can be part of adapting to climate change. But it's also under our portfolio initiatives. I see, for example, the CDM Group Plan Review is to have a plan to ensure effective response and recovery from emergencies by the community. And it just seems to me that that whole initiative should be around, I presume, a community development type approach. And I'm not so sure that the TAs, I really see the TAs doing that. So I'm just wondering, you know, can we, and the other one, I guess, is also about climate change, developing the action plan in collaboration with the community. I guess that refers more to the National Adaptation Plan, but I'm just wondering how can we as a council give some meaning to to achieve those levels of service, and to make the portfolio initiatives real, rather than kind of just like being there. And maybe, and I will add this, that this is a resource issue. I'm not sure. I just wonder if someone could make some comment to me about that.
Thanks, Tim.
Yes, I can answer that. If I was to summarise it, a lot of it is to do with the way the level of service has been written, which is about, so level of service 23.3, which sits under raise awareness for how the community can be part of adapting to climate change, specifically says for this year, assess the implications of the National Adaptation Plan and the Emissions Reduction Plan. So it specifically mentions those, and therefore we're at risk of not being able to meet that. It doesn't mean, and this is where we probably do need to put some text around it, that we're not involved in thinking about adaptation planning and even working with our territorial authorities. And I would just highlight the climate change, the Canterbury Mayoral Forum Climate Change Working Group, which is a staff working group, sits under the Mayoral Forum, is right now involved in working with the TAs as to what adaptation planning is being done right now, and how we can work together and try and get this going as a community initiative across all the different authorities. So it's a very good question, and I think it probably looks worse than it is through the kind of the way the level of service has been written, but there is a significant amount of work that is going on in this space, and we're carrying on despite the National Adaptation Plan not being in place.
Thanks, Tom. There are some comments I might make around this part of the report. I'm not sure if you'd like that later. I see there are other questions too.
I'm just wondering if Catherine, did you want to add anything to that, to Tim's commentary on that particular point, or shall I go to Councillor Southworth?
Yeah, it was just to clarify around the Canterbury Civil Defence Emergency Management Group plan, which you referred to at the beginning, Phil. So that's a legislative requirement that we are required to review that plan. It's overdue, and obviously with the changes in civil defence, that is a TA and regional council document that we work on together. So yeah, underway.
Could I just?
I think Giles, you just want to say something.
Your comments around emergency management are well made, Phil. You'll be aware that there is a review of the Emergency Management Act going on at the moment. There is a briefing arranged for council in the next couple of months to allow some input into that. And obviously there's a lot of work going on in that space, particularly with Sean Poff as the new controller coming in and looking to work with the joint committee. But John Sunkel, as the council's representative on that, and myself are working through how we ensure that ECAN and the council are involved in that process in the appropriate way, which probably doesn't answer your specific question around the level of service, but does give you some comfort around input from the council into the work and the role of CDEM going forward under the new legislative requirements that are emerging.
Thanks, Giles. And I think at this stage, I just look forward to the opportunity to be able, for us as a council to be able to make comment on that. So thank you.
Right. Councillor Southworth.
Thank you. Firstly, I'm looking at page 33 or 16. And so I'd just like to make a comment first, which I'm really pleased to see the acknowledgement of our contaminated land team winning an award with the Australasian Land and Groundwater Association. I think that listed land use register is just daylighting something that's so easily buried, and yet it's so important for us to know about contaminated land and what's there affecting our lives today that was tucked away in the past without anybody hopefully at the time realising quite what they were going to be for us. On that note, I'm just interested to know what state or stage we're at with the remediating sites in South Christchurch, which is mentioned in the paragraph above the listed land use register award. How is that going, please?
Is that a Tim thing?
Yes, it is me, but unfortunately, I don't have an answer to be able to tell you straight off on beyond what's in here. That I know that it is ongoing, that they are working on getting that. I don't believe the tender has been let yet, but there is a plan in place for the remediation of this land.
And we can get back to you on that.
Yeah, I'd love a bit of detail because I think it's in my constituency in Phil Clearwater. Thank you.
Sure, we'll make sure in the next report we've got it as well.
Thanks, Tim. Chair Huey.
Yeah, as usual, thank you very much for these reports. They're great, they're very informative, and I think they're really good. So particularly on the climate change one, I'd just like to follow on from the sort of questions that Phil had and the issues he was raising and the outcomes we're expecting. And I know Tim particularly knows about this, but with the Mayoral Forum and all the TLAs about 2 weeks ago, we had a presentation from Professor Don Hines. And one of the questions I asked, for a start, it was incredibly informative, and it's about behavioural change. And it's a tool that I don't know that we're using very well in New Zealand. And I specifically asked him that question about whether it's common to have units or groups of people in organisations that do behavioural change. He didn't seem to know about New Zealand, but he knew about Australia, and they're common in use in their area. And he had some great examples of how you can work with the community around communication plans. But the key to it is not understanding your community that you're directing the message at first from a psychology perspective. So I'm wondering if we got any plans, and perhaps this is a question for you, Taflin, around using that sort of research here at Canterbury University around behavioural change with any of these climate change outcomes that we're expecting. And if we haven't, can we have a look into his work and see if that is something that would sit parallel alongside what we're doing here? Thanks very much.
Thanks, Chair. Yep, no, I'm happy to answer that. We've actually picked up with Jessie. So Jessie and I are having a look at perhaps getting Professor Don Hine to come and talk to us about the work that they're specifically doing at UC. But to answer your question in terms of where we put behaviour change specialists, traditionally they sit in comms teams. And so you end up with them somewhat diluted in terms of those skills that you're actually bringing in. We've done a lot of work, for example, around the air quality. So over the last couple of decades around changing the behaviours in the community for a better outcome. Obviously, we don't publicly call it behaviour change. It sounds a little bit manipulative, but it is those specialist skills. But we've traditionally brought them in when we've needed them for particular campaigns. But it is something that we've been talking about. And Jessie and I have picked up particularly the request to loop back in with Don Hine and see if we can use the UC specialist skills.
I just want to just follow on, Peter, if that's all right. I think that's fantastic, but I think we need to think about prioritising it a bit more, because with climate change, it's absolutely imperative that we get these messages right. And we're spending a lot of money on that climate change program without really, I think, knowing what our community really would adapt to. And if we have a look at the road transport, ads on TV at the moment. They're over a 10-year period that program's going to go, and they've used this approach. And I don't think just because they're set it up in the comms team, they should be watered down. I think it's time we changed our behaviour patterns about that ourselves and saw that communication is the most essential thing we do, because we can't be working on climate change and all of these other areas without being related to that. So I guess that I'm just saying that I urge us to do that, and you know, I'd like to see that happening before the end of this term, if that's possible. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Chair Jenny. And as you've noted, also in the travel demand management space, which also relates to emissions, that's something that you've highlighted with us. So it's good to be reminded. I think Councillor Scott.
Well, just quickly responding to Lan's comment around gross emissions. One of the big parts of the emissions that's been looked at is the project Waka Eki Noa by the Dairy NZ and Beef and Lamb, and that process is coming to an end, and the government needs to make a decision whether they accept any recommendations from that farming group on how to account for those things, or they they make another decision on that. So that's another piece of that jigsaw line.
Right, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I think that relates to the next emissions reduction plan, but will inform it. But thanks, it is a piece of it. Thanks.
Cool. It's probably a good segue actually into the air quality transport and urban development portfolio, which I will just introduce and then invite any questions. Just in terms of this portfolio report, there is a meeting of the Transport and Urban Development Committee on the 14th of April, and so there will be, in terms of the papers there's updates on lots of these projects in more detail that will be more up to date. So I just draw your attention to that, the fact that that's coming through in the not so distant future. But just in terms of the report, which starts on page 38 of 56, I just draw your attention to the fact that we have reached autumn, and so people's minds turn to log burners and winter air quality. And so the team is gearing up for the winter program in terms of air quality, and we expect to bring through an update to you in early June on that, if not before, because I know at this time of year people start thinking about what are we doing for winter air quality. I will note that we did a post-winter update to a couple of the more relevant councils, which are Timaru and Waimakariri District, after the last winter, and we're just looking at making sure at a staff level we're working very closely with them, but at a governance layer, making sure that we can touch base before winter as well. There's some reference in the paper to the PM 2.5, and I will note that the government actually hasn't yet come out with the new standards, and so we are still working from a government regulatory perspective to the PM 10. In terms of the next part of the report, which is around the public transport, transforming public transport, I think council's had quite a lot of recent conversations around what's going on in public transport, and again I will say that a good update is coming to the Transport and Urban Development Committee in a fortnight, but if there's anything there, I know staff will be happy to talk to it. And in terms of the integrating urban land use and regional transport, again, the Greater Christchurch Partnership work has obviously moved on since this second quarter report, and I note that, again, the Greater Christchurch Partnership and the spatial plan in particular will be a subject of conversation with council over the next couple of months as it brings forward preferred urban forms towards its June deadline. So that we're working towards to have conversations with councils with. So in terms of the levels of service and the key portfolio initiatives, I think, again, you'll be familiar with much of the work that's going on there. And I just would state that where there are oranges, staff are very conscious of the need to make sure that things stay on track and action plans are developed, and we bring those through to you where there's matters of concern, and you'll be aware of some of those matters that have come to you in recent times. So happy to take any questions. And I see Councillor Clearwater.
Well, thank you, Catherine. And yeah, and I guess like as the report shows, and the graph on page 39 around the PM10s clearly indicates improvement over the years. And you said though that and I was pleased to hear we're gearing up to talk with TAs, and you have already talked with Timaru where there's some significant issues. Did you? I just wanted to clarify. Did you mean that we will be talking with all of our local TAs, like for example, Rangiora, and Sal? Well, I see. Yeah.
The two where there's the major problems are still outstanding are Timaru District Council and Waimakariri District Council areas. And so I know post-winter last year they had an update on how the programs went and how it went in there. That I was just talking with staff about making sure just exactly what the arrangements are pre this winter. So I'll just need to get an update on that and come back to you. But I know the intent is that we make sure that the TAs are fully engaged with the work that we're doing and understand how we're working. So thank you for drawing that.
Thank you. And in talking to governance, I'm sure perhaps some of our chairs or councillors might also assist if you'd like our presence. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know Peter's been very conscious of the need to talk to Timaru District Council around this. So thank you. Yeah. Councillor Edge.
Thanks, Catherine. I just wanted to congratulate the transport team for an outstanding delivery of a whole range of stuff over the second quarter. And I've noted, we've been able to deliver 25 new electric buses. The living wage for drivers has been settled. We've undertaken the service review for routes 17 and 28. And that received about 700 submissions, and obviously now we're reviewing the feedback for that. We've also ensured that the under-19s tertiary fair was in place before Christmas for that 2-year trial, so that's another great effort. And also the My Way scheme, that's been extended, the funding for that's been extended by Waka Kotahi. And an exceptional number of almost 200,000 rides on a very popular service down in Timaru. And the other really big thing too that's been reported on is the real-time information system that's in place. So they're really outstanding range of things for public transport service deliveries across the region. On page 41, under the key public transport challenges, obviously COVID-19's affected patronage, and it does mention 65% average from where we were. That's the second quarter. Things have probably got a little bit worse, but I do note on page 44 the reduced revenue that's coming through as a result of that. So in terms of my question on that, I presume that that level of patronage has continued to drop, in which case the impacts on fare income is continuing to rise in terms of reduced income. Is that correct?
We want to bring you a full update on the impact of this through to you in a timely way in terms of the annual plan discussions as well. But Catherine, you might like to make a comment.
Yeah, thank you. That was exactly the comment I was going to make, because obviously it's still an ongoing issue, and we will bring a fuller picture to you for the deliberations so that you can make decisions around how much you invest or top up those reserves to enable patronage to return.
Thanks, Catherine. And I'd sort of note too on page 43 as well, those potentially at-risk areas, and I suppose your report that come back to us with a wee bit more detail about those. The My Way, well, in My Way, it's been sorted a little bit, really, hasn't it? Because they've extended it for quite some time. But yeah, the PT futures implementation process and the national ticketing system update that'll follow.
Yes, and I know from the TNUD committee agenda preparation that some of that information will be covered in those agenda papers. So yeah, a more up-to-date look at that will happen.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank
Grant.
you very much. Thanks.
Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie.
Yeah, so just back to air quality. So page 43 of 56 or 26 in the agenda. Just in relation to air quality monitoring, I noticed that there are issues with potentially filling vacancies on staff. I'm quite concerned because there's a relationship between bad air quality and mortality from COVID. And we're in COVID, it's moving south in our country at the moment, and we're going into winter. And I think it's really important that we do actually try and act with some urgency on this if we can, particularly with respect to PM 2.5, which is the particle size that tends to cause the most damage to people. I guess, yeah, I guess I'd just sort of like staff to just have a wee bit more of a rethink around that relationship between COVID mortality and PM 2.5, and particularly in terms of perhaps even looking at reassessing all our air sheds in Canterbury, because there will be some areas that have what appear to be acceptable PM10 levels, but the PM 2.5 could be quite bad. So, yeah, I'd like to get some commentary around where we're heading with that in the future. Thank you.
Great, and actually it's a good point because while the standards around PM10 at the moment, monitoring does actually monitor 2.5, and as you say, when you look at that, it is quite a different story. I see Taff nodding. One of the things that we wanted to do when we brought some more detailed air quality briefing back to you was to talk around the science, because they are looking quite carefully at what they do around the monitoring. So but we'll take that away and make sure that's part of that briefing when we bring it back. I don't know if any other staff want to make a comment on that while we're on the subject. All good? Great, thank you. So with that, we'll move on to the last portfolio, which is on page 45 of 56, Regional and Strategic Leadership, which I will hand over to Taff Lynn for.
Thank you, Catherine. So a few of the things in this report have been covered, such as the nature of regional and strategic leadership, but there were some highlights that are unique to this portfolio in up to the end of December. The most significant ones are probably sitting on that page 45 at the beginning of the portfolio there. So the first reading of the Night Title Bill on the 8th of December, and obviously councillors are aware of how that is progressing through. And the appointment of our very first heranga, which is David, who is not online at the moment. He's in another meeting, but that we're obviously very pleased to have that role sitting at the director level as well, and it speaks to the importance of the relationship, and as councillors are well aware. So the Wananga with the Runanga has been talked about already in the Tim's portfolio, and obviously a couple of others as well. So that partnership piece is now progressing, as councillors are aware of that too. So other highlights for the Q2 report for us was the allocating of the Waitaha Action to Impact Fund at the first round, the pilot round of the contestable fund, which councillors put into the long-term plan, and we'll be bringing that back to council at a briefing next week to discuss that a bit further. So there's been a number of submissions that have gone through to central government that are listed on page 46 of 56. The public engagement is increasing, so we're seeing more lagoimas come through. We've seen more public forum participants come through, mainly at council meetings rather than committee meetings, but obviously the putting in the extra committee meetings, the public meetings, does enable people to come through a little bit more in a little bit more targeted way. So we are starting to see a little bit of that happening as well, which is great. Annual plan, obviously, so the development of that happened before the end of Q2, and we're seeing the results of that as that's rolled out and those increased emissions. Climate change engagement, the freshwater plans, etc., have already been discussed, but they're obviously on the radar for us now in this portfolio about how we're going to engage with the community on those things. Another highlight was the recruitment of the youth Rōpū, who you're going to hear from in a minute, and the fact that that group has almost entirely refreshed, or has entirely refreshed. So a new cohort has come through, and the council gave the green light to the Green Philanthropy Fund as well through the Christchurch Foundation. So there's been a number of milestones in this portfolio as well. It's obviously not all rosy. There's a couple of points that are flagged as orange. I'll just draw your attention to those. So they're on page 49 of 56. There, and the levels of service and the key portfolio initiatives, the two that are in orange status for Q2, they're obviously reflecting each other there in those two tables. So the regional policy statement is now progressing, but it's just flagged as orange, and that's just around the timeline piece. We're also just keeping a close eye on that. And then our regulatory services and our consenting compliance. So they're flagged as orange even in status 2 because we're starting to feel the pinch around the overseer piece, around COVID and being able to do the face-to-face compliance work, and around staffing recruitment issues that have been raised as well under the air quality piece. So we were starting to feel the pinch in there, so they were flagged up as orange in Q2. And the COVID piece has also impacted our schools work. So we have actually had quite a number of schools that we haven't been able to get into because of not being able to do that face-to-face interaction due to the COVID restrictions. And the very last thing that I'll mention there is the finances, that we can just see there's a little bit of discrepancy from budget, and that's predominantly around our user pays work. So we're seeing less income from user pays, but less expenditure related to the work that's being done in that space. So underneath the risks, we've got low and green on page 50 around that compliance, monitoring, enforcement, which looks a little bit inconsistent with that orange, but because of the mitigations that we were putting in place, we may well be reporting slightly differently on Q3 on that, because we're still feeling that, but that's why that's just a little bit different, the orange and the green there. So that's probably me on that one, but I will take questions, and I see Chair Huey's hand is up first there.
Thank you very much, Tafflin. It's all fantastic, all the work we're doing in this. I think it's just a really sense of achievement. It's fantastic. I've just got two questions. My first one is around, and it might be answered next week when you are bringing a advisory session to council around the Waitaha Action to Impact Fund. But I'll be very interested to see, and I hope you're going to include it in the presentation, you know, how onerous is the criteria that the senior panel of staff are going to be using to assess those projects, and is there a scope there to review that process? Because I don't think it's too onerous, because I remember raising this when you initially set the project up, but sometimes the groups, in my experience, feel it is more onerous than it's tended to be. So I'm very interested to see what they do report back, and you know, really the best practice, I think, is not making it too onerous at all. So that's my first question. Do you want to make a comment about that?
Yep, I can very quickly answer that ahead of next week. Is that was part of the feedback review that we've done. So we've actually sought feedback from staff, but also the groups themselves around that criteria. So we will bring that back next week. Yep.
That'll be good. And my second question relates to the integrated planning, and we're flagging it at the moment because we were a little bit worried about the progress. But what's the criteria we're applying to when we get seriously worried about it? How are we going to know it goes from flagging it to actually, and what are we going to do about it?
I might defer to Catherine on that one. Yeah.
Next week, actually, Andrew will be in front of you. He is bringing through a range of the technical work that's going on. So he wants to paint a picture of the different streams of work. So there's the partnership work that's going through, but there's also work that's going on in terms of the technical work that we can be getting on with that will set us up well for making progress on the integrated plan. So I think we're beginning to see a pattern where we're going to have to keep you quite well abreast of it because of the hold-ups that we've been having. So recently ELT had a very detailed update on that, and we look at it every couple of weeks in terms of as an executive, but I think there'll be an opportunity next week to talk to Andrew around that from the work program that he's got going, and that will help to give you a bit more of a flavour.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine. If I might just continue, Chair. I think that's great that you're doing that, given that we're rolling over to a new triennium shortly, till next term. We'll need to be showing that we did this early on enough. So, you know, if you've got some sort of regular reporting back to us, I think that'd be really useful. So thank you very much.
Shall we move to Councillor Pauling now?
Yep. Kia ora, Catherine. Thank you so much. Hey, I just wanted to make another comment about some of the good work that's gone on here on page 48. It mentions the dust work we've been doing with the community and the quite intense work we did last November and December, where we had 4 workshops with members of the community in the sort of Horsell, Yulthurst area. And just wanted to really acknowledge Catherine Harbrow and her team for the work there. It wasn't easy, but I think we had some really good meetings, and I'm now looking forward to the work for this year going ahead and how we respond to the community. So just acknowledging that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie.
Yeah, I've just got a couple of questions. Just picking up on the dust. I just noticed that in the key portfolio initiatives, so this is page 49 of 56 or 32 of the agenda, that the response to dust and odour issues is coded orange for Q2. Can someone just expand on this a little bit, on why it's coded at risk for Q2? Thank you.
Yeah, so Catherine Harbrow might want to jump in on that, but that's actually, it's including the dust and odour issues. So that's actually covering our entire regulatory response. And so we were flagging that up in terms of those resources, the overseer piece, the COVID and inability to go face to face. So it's not just on the dust piece. It might be, again, one of those things that's not that terribly well worded because it's including the dust and odour issues, but not specific to those, why it's orange. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I just had a question also about the level of service 35, which was around the effective consenting and compliance monitoring. And is that the same reason for that, or is that staff and resource, or is that the COVID reason again?
It's all of the above, actually, because we're getting a combined effect now. Yeah.
Okay. So my final questions relate to governance and engagement with the community. I see level of service 40, which is providing robust and transparent governance processes that allow community participation, is coded red. So is that just around our ability to respond to official information requests? That's not around other aspects? Is that correct?
Unfortunately, that's correct. And it is literally around one Lagoima that we sent out beyond its statutory timeframe. And so because we have this 100% of the OI requests, unfortunately, that means that will sit red now for the rest of the year. So,
okay. No, that's great. So my final question relates to the table on page, where are we? Page 30 of the agenda. Which is the numbers and statistics around public forums, deputations, petitions, and the different committees and that sort of thing. Can someone provide me with some context about how do we compare with other regional councils in terms of our engagement in these ways with the community? How do our numbers compare with other regional councils?
That might be something that we'll need to go and investigate. I see Catherine McMillan's online, so Catherine might have some visibility of that, but potentially not. But it's certainly something that we can have a look at. Come back to you.
Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Just to respond, we haven't actually got those numbers, but I'm quite happy to find them for you.
Thank you. That'd be great.
And I see Councillor Mackay.
Got my camera on now that I've got dressed up to walk out the door in a couple of minutes. My question just goes back, and I'm just going to have to go to the screen. On page 48 of 56, there on the bottom left-hand column, we talk about there are no immediate plans to purchase or install any new monitoring equipment with respect to the dust at Yaldhurst or at Christchurch. In our long-term plan discussions, we actually allocated 500,000 to buy additional monitoring equipment for this year that we're currently in, so that we could do some ongoing monitoring. What's happened to those funds if they haven't been used for what we allocated them for? This may not be the appropriate forum to get that information, but just say so if it isn't.
Catherine.
Yeah, so obviously purchasing of equipment is a capital asset. So the cost for that would take a long time before it actually hits the budget in an operating expenditure type because of the depreciation. But what we are doing, so it says immediate plans. So obviously through the co-design work that we're doing with the community, the solutions that we are putting in place will be decided by them. So we are testing different equipment to see, depending on what the outcome from those discussions might be, it might be a PM2.5 monitoring equipment, or it might be a PM10, it might be something completely different. So depending on what the community feedback is, will depend on what purchase we might need if we are doing some monitoring.
So can you just remind me then, was it just a one-off 500,000 that we were looking to borrow, or was it annual over 3 to 5 years? I had a funny feeling it was 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, it was 3 years at 450k. 400 of that is staffing. So we've got additional resourcing to do monitoring and to run the actual program. And the 50k is kind of the depreciation. So
okay.
Yeah, and because we haven't actually bought, there's a delay in that depreciation kicking in.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. I just saw a question from Elizabeth McKenzie, but I think you might just have gone over that again and explained the CapEx, OpEx split there. Is that okay, Councillor McKenzie?
So does that mean basically that there will just be probably a delay in terms of purchasing equipment that we need? Is that what you're saying, Catherine?
Yes, so depending on what's the community solution will be, depends on what equipment we might purchase.
Right, okay, thank you.
So in terms of, if there's no other questions around that portfolio, I'll just a quick wrap up and say in terms of this report, this will now go on the website once any minor editorial changes are picked up, but what we are looking forward to doing is bringing through the third quarter, as I say, in late April and May through to those two committees, Audit, Finance and Risk, and then Regional Strategic Leadership, and then bringing you a suite of information that's up to date ahead of your deliberations on the annual plan, particularly around the finances, as some of you have noted, around reserves and that sort of thing. So thank you. That's been valuable for us as staff to get your feedback and see where your lines of questioning have been, and we'll come back with some of the matters that you've raised. So I'll hand back to you, Peter, I think.
Kia ora, Catherine. Thanks for that, and thanks for Councillor involvement in that and the questions that you're asked. I can go to Christina. Christina, we put those recommendations up that were on page 14. So you'll note some red in the recommendations as written, and the red is there in terms of trying to provide some more visibility around the work that we've just discussed. So I won't read those out. I'll give you a moment to read them, 1 through 3. And when you're ready, I'll ask for a mover, please, to put your hand up, and a seconder. So I've got Timatanga Cranwell that's going to move the recommendations. And seconded by Councillor Phil Clearwater. All those in favour, I'll take I'll take no reaction as being assent, and so all those in favour, all those against, put your hand up. So that's carried. Thank you very much for that. Now we move to page 51, and I must say that you've been very patient, Coulter, and also Alice. And I know that Matt was here earlier because I saw him earlier, but he skipped out. Oh, there you are, Matt.
Just locked it with Peter.
Yeah, and also Kimberly. Welcome, Kimberly, to your first meeting. But Teflon, as we did with 8.1, if you're happy enough to facilitate this session, I'll hand to you, and you can go through it. So thank you, Teflon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no problem at all. So yeah, obviously delighted to have Coulter and Alice with us to be able to go through this report on what the Youth Rōpū has been up to. But just quickly before I do that, obviously, Matt, thank you. I don't know if you'd be here, whether it'd be an apology or not today, and just wanting to introduce to Council. You already know Matt from the last Regional and Strategic Leadership Committee, introducing the paper, but Kimberly is also part of our youth engagement and education team. We were just talking to Jenny and Peter before this meeting about the fact that Kimberly is in one of the FTE that Council very kindly gave us in the long-term plan to help support the engagement and education work that we're doing. So Kimberly and Matt will obviously be able to answer any questions from the Environment Canterbury side, but I'm going to hand over now to Coulter to take us through the Youth Rōpū's report and then obviously open it up to some dialogue. Thanks, Coulter.
Kia ora, Teflon. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko rapaki te maunga, ko opo aho te awa, no Ngāti Pakeha te iwi, no Otutahi aho, ko Coulter Carson aho, no reira tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora, everyone. My name's Coulter, as you might have gathered. It's a real pleasure to be here. I just wanted to give a big thanks to the council for this opportunity. It's been really cool to see like the process for how this kind of thing works, and also for the like unprecedented opportunity to like be able to put my hand up and like actually talk to this stuff, which I wasn't expecting. But yeah, also big thanks to Matt, Kim, and Alice for like supporting me with this little report I'm going to give today. I might get stuck right into it. Basically, in the document that we supplied, we talked about the values of the EYR, and so I assume all of you have read that. And I'm just going to jump straight into following up on our annual plan, the work that we've been doing. This has been like a huge project for us, tons of mahi going on from the new Rōpū, and it's really kind of like allowed us to forge some strong bonds by tackling this big project together. So yeah, to recap, we split into two groups. We had one that was doing youth engagement. So this is reaching out and trying to gather as many submissions as we can from young people. Sorry, not gather, encouraging young people to submit. And then the second group was drafting a submission to represent our views, our internal views. So this was more of like a reflection and a collation kind of exercise. So it was, yeah, the 50-50 split. And I feel like I'm really proud of what we've done in the limited time that we've had, just like the 1 month submission period, I feel like we've made heaps of progress. And we've had some like preliminary results from the submissions that are really encouraging. It's sort of showing a big bump in the 18 to 24 age bracket. So that's really cool to see that lots of people are like making submissions from the group that we're targeting. So I'll just, I am part of the youth engagement like subgroup of EYR that we're working on right now. So I'll just give you a wee update on what we've been up to. So basically we had what I was working on is the social media campaign. And this was aimed at making content that was accessible and engaging for youth. Essentially, we just wanted to have the look and feel of everything that we were producing on our social media to be like really relevant and like sort of engaging for youth. Yeah, so we were using formats and styles that were like highly relevant to other rangatahi. So this is like TikTok videos, Instagram stuff, just like sort of steering away from those like really nice polish like kind of graphics that you often see that are just so easy to scroll past. And yeah, so in the month that we've been working on this, throughout our weekly meetings and then an extended hui as well, and other little sub meetings, together we've generated about 20 Instagram items, including posts, reels, and interactive filters, and 10 videos on TikTok, which is another social media platform, if any of you aren't aware of that. And kind of the outcome of this was about 7,000 plus engagements total on the social media platforms. We're expecting this to go up as well. Like it's been kind of an exponential engagement as it gets closer and closer. So I'm pretty proud of that. Yeah, it's just been really cool to see everybody putting their heads together and coming up with some really cool stuff. One member who's not here today, Greg, came up with the campaign Fair Say. So just encouraging a bit of a play on words to encourage youth to have a fair say on bus fares. Cool. So that was the social media stuff. Then we had within the youth engagement group, we also had a couple of our members working on a high school email campaign, and they sent a resource. They basically just reached out to 47 schools around Waitaha and sent a resource pack and like a message imploring students to make submissions. We have heard back from around 10 of these schools, but yeah, we haven't quantified really the impact of that yet. So that'll happen soon. And then there have been a couple of other sort of smaller endeavors that I can't quite think of right now. But one other thing we did, or that I personally did, is went and gave an in-person speech at my old high school, Christchurch Rudolph Steiner School, to the upper school assembly. That was this Monday, which was cool. It was a rather poorly attended event, or just like a small number of people there, around 80 students or something. But it was cool to like not just do reaching out digitally, like to actually see people face to face and like, you know, look people in the eye and tell them that they need to make a submission. Cool. So that's kind of an overview of what we've been up to on the youth engagement, which is the team that I was part of. And then the other team, which was a group of about 5 or 6 of our members, were tasked with making a submission to represent the EYR views. Like this is basically just collating all our views and writing a really good submission. So this was just finished. I think the final draft was sent through today for review for all of our members. And interestingly, there was a 50-50 split between option 1 and 2 on the bus fares restructure. There's more detail in our submission, which you'll see. We're planning to submit this tomorrow on the 1st, and we will be speaking to this to council as well, which will be quite exciting. Oh, another thing that I should have mentioned as well is that we chose in this whole engagement process, just to like maximize our impact and like relevance for youth, is only to focus on the bus fares restructure. So we chose not to look at the climate change levy or the flood recovery, just because we felt like it was a bit more sort of tenuous to engage youth on, and we couldn't really come up with like good techniques or strategies for like communicating what we wanted to say about those issues. So we just focused all energy into the public transport section. Once it just a kind of overall summary. I'm really proud of the group. Lots of mahi from a real range of members in the group, of course, and doing things that were new to people, like totally picking up new skills, which is really cool to see. And I just feel like I was quite daunted at the beginning, and I felt like we were a bit slow, but since about halfway through this month, we've really been picking it up, and it's been really cool to see the results. So I'm quite proud of what we've done. And I think that's kind of all I have to say about our annual plan work. It's been quite a hurdle. And we had last Sunday, we had a hui online, a zui. And we were just, it was quite nice to think about life after the annual plan. It's been a real mission. It's just been a lot of work, but yeah. So it'll be cool to like get together and celebrate and like look at the impact we've had and all that. So that's kind of all I have to say about the annual plan. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Matt or Alice or Kim, onto that?
I might step in if that's okay, Calder, just for 1 second. Kia ora koutou. Ngā mihi nui ki te kaupapa tēnei rā, tēnā koutou ngā councillors, tēnā koutou he kamahi kanihara taio ki Waitaha, kia ora te whānau. Ko Matt toku ingoa. My name is Matt. I work with Coulter and Alice and Kimberley. Thanks, guys. It's been really good, actually, from my point of view, just to have that portfolio analysis too. It's really interesting. Coulter, Alice and I have been chatting while we've been listening in. So there's lots of opportunities, which is cool. I did just want to mihi to Stacey and the annual plan engagement work. The feedback from the Youth Rōpū's long-term plan submission process actually fed into the slight tweaks to the annual plan engagement HQ. So I'm sure you'll know about it, but so that it was much easier for the Youth Rōpū to use the tools to encourage the use of the tool. So just going into the bus fare bit, in the engagement HQ where you don't need to do the whole thing, and it was 3 minutes. And so I just wanted to mention that the previous Youth Rōpū's feedback supported that transition into a slightly cleaner engagement HQ, and to Mihi, to Stacey, who's also kind of done that, which also allowed the group then to really be focused on their approach, hence why they picked the fair say and fair review. I also want to Mihi to the whole group, because they formed pretty towards the end of last year, and we reformed, I think, February the 20th, and obviously submissions opened in the first week of March. They had a very, very small time frame, and I think that it's testament to the efficiency that they are working, and also the focused approach that they took. So I just wanted to Mihi to you guys formally, really. And I think that we've got it was on Monday, a 30% increase in the proportion of 15 to 24-year-olds compared to the 2021 long-term plan submitting. And I'm really excited. I don't usually get excited about numbers, but I'm really excited about seeing the final report. So it will be really interesting to see what we get.
Yeah, honestly, that was a really invaluable change, I think, the new tool and just how easy it was to engage with people. Additionally, I just wanted to add that if any of you are curious or keen to help out with our engagement plan, I'd encourage you to check out our feeds on Instagram and TikTok if you partake in those things. And there you can see, like, for instance, how easy it was to communicate how to make a submission. Like, we have one of our members, Jolie, like literally walking through the process and how quick it is. And I feel like that leaving it open-ended and just saying make a submission and leave it there, it's quite intimidating to people, and it feels like quite a barrier. So yeah, with the tool, I feel like that really democratized the accessibility for making a submission. It was super helpful for us. But yeah, and unless anyone else on the team has other anything else they'd like to add, I'm happy to open it up for questions now. Got a few hands raised.
Chair Huey is first there.
Yes, I want to say how fabulous it is to see you here today. It's just lovely to have you here, Coulter, for your report, and Matt and Alice. And it's really good to hear about how engaged you've become in our annual plan. I wonder if you've got some wisdom for us. I'm sure it's a great learning experience for you, but have you got any thoughts, and no worries if you haven't, but any thoughts about how the average citizen or household might find engaging with such an annual plan? What do you reckon about it? Do you think it's real hard for them, put them off, be too alienating, or just wonderful and easy? What do you think about the average person?
Yeah,
maybe,
I mean,
maybe the average person is your friend who doesn't know anything about this.
sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess I can't really give you a full answer because all the discussions that I had with my friends and peers were about the bus fares restructure. So I can't really speak to the climate change levy or the flood recovery. But I mean, I think just the nature of the question asked in the annual plan was just so straightforward that it was quite easy for people to engage with. Like, it was just I feel like like previously as a citizen, like kind of doing have your say type stuff, the questions have, like this time it was quite clear that it was just like, look, there's an opportunity to get free buses. Like that kind of that poses the question in a really clear way, and it's just like very palatable and just like easy to unpack, I guess, for people. So I think it was quite good in that respect. But yeah, so that was just like an excellent choice of just an excellent question to put to people. Like, what do you want for public transport? So I think, yeah, it was very, very good in that respect.
Thank you. Next up, we've got Councillor Pauling.
Hi, kia ora koutou, Alice, tēnā kōrua, koutou ko Matt, Kimberley hoki. Thanks so much for your presentation and your paper. I've got a couple of questions. First of all is I saw that you had a multi-regional Rōpū hui, which sounds exciting. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. If you could share something about that, must have been great to meet with other youth representatives from around the country. And also, I'm really keen, because I, like you, am looking forward to getting through the annual plan process. It is exciting and it is important, but it is good to then think about what we can do with that. But I'm really keen to hear from you or Alice about what you think the next big project for you guys is coming up later in the year, and what you might get your teeth stuck into, so to speak. So, kia ora.
I'll just start that off and straight away say that I was unable to attend the multi-regional hui, so I might have to pass that off to Alice or perhaps Matt or Kimberley, who might be able to speak to that better. Did any of you guys have something specifically that you'd like to say?
Alice, do you want to, or do you want me to speak to it?
You're on mute.
Kia ora koutou. Ko hakatiri te awa, ko makakaha te maunga, ko Alice tōku ingoa. I was able to attend like the first half of the multi-regional meeting, so I missed the main like discussion bits and got to do the get to know yous. But I found that part really fun, and it was really beneficial just to get to like have that just informal chat with different people, different youth who are really engaged and interested in this kind of like space. But I didn't get to join the discussion, so I'm not really sure what the outcome of that was. But I think from the feedback that we heard from the rest of the Rōpū was that it was really like quite interesting to see how the different groups were doing it around the country, and seeing what was working for them.
Thanks, Alice. Matt, did you want to add anything there? Are you happy with that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done, Alice. It was just to say, so Waikato Regional Council and Bay of Plenty Regional Council, Waikato have a youth Rōpū, and the Bay of Plenty are developing something similar. We also have some from Northland Regional Council. So you should be very proud that Environment Canterbury was the first council with a youth Rōpū. So Mihi to my predecessor, Hannah, for setting that up. And yeah, really nice just to connect, again, build a network, similar like-minded young people. And so we will be repeating a kind of probably over about 2 or 3 times a year, because they can share expertise and some of the challenges, but also it just makes it really efficient to kind of, you know, share little things like this is our t-shirt design, and we've decided to do kind of have some kind of a common identity, and this is what we're working on, and it's been really nice. One of the outcomes for one of the other members, actually, they were so inspired from the discussion that they are going to run for their council after just, yeah, which was pretty cool, because they suddenly realized there was that kind of groundswell in environmental issues for young people. And I think that some of the discussion around how our youth Rōpū had worked in the governance space had been quite inspiring for them. So that was probably my key take home. To hear that a couple of days afterwards was quite exciting.
Thanks, Alice and Matt. Councillor Clearwater.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Just before we move on, I'll just answer the second part of the question, which was what are we tackling next? And to be totally honest, I haven't really had the space to think about that. Just listening to, I've had a lot of ideas listening to the session today, and I have a whole string of questions that I've written up. It doesn't seem like we'll have time to get through those, but like just off the top of my head, there was mention in the public transport and urban development of consultation about like developing plans like Greater Christchurch 2050 and the spatial plan. I can't quite remember the name, but that's something that I'm super passionate about, and I'd love to be involved with that process of like engaging, making sure that youth voice is present on that discussion about you know, what should Greater Christchurch look like, and you know, what do we want what direction do we want urban development to go? But yeah, so I don't really have a satisfactory answer. Matt probably has a better grasp on that than myself.
Hey, that's awesome, Coulter, and I think maybe that could be arranged, that you could, and other members of the youth Rōpū could come and be involved in that process. I think we should look at that. So yeah, kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you so much.
Sorry about that, Councillor Pauling, missing off the second half of the question. Councillor Clearwater.
Look, thank you so much, you guys. What you're doing is really exciting, and like it's impressive. And like I think you said it was Greg who came up with the thing fair say. Like those sort of ideas are just wonderful. And yep, there's tons of scope for you for other steps that you might take, including looking at engaging around 2050, because it's your future. I just had a question too, and like clearly the engagement you've done, as I've indicated, is really impressive, and using social media. I just wanted to make sure that in fact you had sort of backup if if you received anything nasty across social media, if there were some people you could go to. Just I guess just doing a wee governance check there, as to hoping that won't happen, but you will probably see in today's press how it does. So just checking.
I think our thank you for the question, by the way. I think our protocol there is Matt and Kim really. They kind of have a really close interface with us, like kind of always on call essentially, and monitoring those feeds. And yeah, it's social media is really tricky because it's very subjective, and what might be, you know, people can interpret things in different ways, and it's very easy to like kind of hide behind an account and say some nasty stuff. But yeah, I think we're pretty well supported in that respect, and it's I think it's a rare opportunity to use social media in a way that's like only engaging in it like because we really want to be effective and like accomplish a task. Whereas a lot of the time, you know, in your day-to-day lives, people just get really sucked into social media, like whether they want to or not. And but yeah, no. So I think we've got a good relationship with it at the moment. Thank you for that, Phil.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Southworth.
Firstly, just to say thank you for your presentation, description, all the work you're doing, and you've done such a good job, and it's really contagious, the enthusiasm. So thank you. And I think just talking about Instagram and TikTok accounts demonstrates just why we need you. Because personally, I have no idea how to do either of those. So thanks for being that network into the younger communities. I do notice that, and this might be a question for Kim and or Matt, around there are still some gaps in your group. And I'm just wondering, what are you doing around filling those? And particularly, I noticed Mid Canterbury hasn't got any representative there. So what's the process there?
Yeah, that's been really tough. Personally, at university, I have a role in a number of courses as a tutor and such, just kind of and involved in a few clubs, and just like have been trying to do my best to shoulder tap people who I think would be good in the role, and like you know, who have shown some interest in like governance and environmental issues and things like that. But I think it's especially with the Mid Canterbury region, I think this is kind of unearthing a greater issue in that the selection process involves demonstrating that you can connect with the communities in the region. And that's just like we've just had really slim pickings of people. So two issues that I see. One is not broadcasting that we're recruiting, or just like not having a far enough reach in terms of advertising that we need people on the council. And two is just the question of is there a better system for electing representatives, which is something we've talked about, and my understanding is that there's been a consideration of like creating an entirely new system where there aren't regional representatives, because there are some issues with this system, as we can see, where right now we're supposed to be having a voice for Mid Canterbury, but we can't find anyone for one reason or another, or you know, like because it's not, you know, we aren't elected onto this council, this group, and so like it begs the question of like, you know, I am the South Canterbury representative, South Christchurch representative, Alice and myself, and like, are we really representing this region? I don't know. It's a bit of a tricky question, but yeah, I think it's something that we really need to think about. Is how we're doing the election process and what it means to be like a representative of a region. And yeah, I think we are really like shorthanded at the moment because we haven't got the full council. And I'd love to get some people on who are really keen. And that being said, I don't want to like misrepresent the region or anything either. So it's something to work on. Thank you for that question, by the way.
No, you're welcome. And it sounds like there is work being done to rectify or to do that. And it's good, the very fact that you're even questioning how are you a representative of your area, and in that it means that you probably are a very good representative because you're aware and concerned about how you represent, if you see what I mean. So that's in itself a good thing. And just a second comment around, I can see that you in your report it mentions that sorry, my son's mobile phone's going off. I hope it's probably not too noisy for you. In your report, you mentioned climate change being of particular interest to the group. And I just wanted to really flag that we do have the Climate Change Action Committee, and Elizabeth Mackenzie and I are the co-chairs for that. So if you would like an opportunity to either raise something that could go onto an agenda or to be involved in some way, it would be great to have your input or find a way to make sure that you do have some involvement in that with us. Great, thanks.
That's really fantastic to hear. Thanks so much for that, Vicky. And I can already see that the cogs turning in Matt's head, because we've been talking about sort of splitting up into action groups and climate change being one of those. So yeah, we'll keep that in mind and like definitely engage with you on that.
Thank you. Councillor Farm, I think, has got the last question here.
Thanks, Taff. Kia ora koutou and Alice. Thank you so much for that. Just a really quick comment. I think you're really underselling the amazing contribution that you're making to this engagement, because even Coulter, you mentioning, oh, you know, just on Monday, I went to my old school and there were only like about 80 people there. You know, on some of our full council engagements with the public online, you know, there's been like 5 or like 11 people. So yeah, your reach and the whole group's reach is just incredible. So thank you so much for all the effort that you're putting into this, and we really look forward to hearing. Like, it's great that you're doing your own Rōpū submission as well, and we really look forward to reading that as part of the annual plan process. And I like that we've got our next meeting just after submissions close. So I hope that if the cogs haven't sort of turned so that we officially get your submission, I hope we can just unofficially have read it already so we can have a proper discussion. But thank you so much for your report and being here with us today. Kia ora.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lan. Yeah, well, who knows what the numbers will look like, but yeah, we're hoping that 15 to 24 age bracket, like Matt said, is going to be a bit higher than maybe it was previously. But yeah. And anyway, it looks like we're at time, so thank you so much for having us on here. It's been really cool, and I hope that we can continue this relationship and continue to do these, or allowing us to sit in on these meetings. It's really cool. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Coulter. And those questions that you've written down, I think if you can get those through perhaps via Matt, and we can see how we can answer them at those monthly catch-ups. Yep. I will hand back to Peter for the resolution. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to see you've got that recommendation up there. Just before we get to that, this has been pretty valuable for us in terms of our feedback from Tafflin, for Tafflin, Matt and Kimberly. Thanks so much. You're doing a great job with the youth Rōpū. And thanks, Coulter and Alice, not only for your enthusiasm, but your leadership. And you want to know what leaders look like, look in the mirror, because that's what they look like. They look like you guys. And we really do appreciate your input into the processes that we go through. Sometimes it can be so dry and almost boring, but not quite. But getting your enthusiasm changes our view on life and helps us, I guess. As our chair has indicated earlier on, we are really, really keen on youth involvement in Environment Canterbury. Vicky has had to reach out to you in terms of climate change, but I'm sure that opportunity exists across the other committees also, wherever your interest lies. We're really conscious of not wanting to put too much pressure on you. You lead busy young lives anyway, so you know, our opportunities will arise, and I'm sure that Kimberly and Matt and Taff will get us into the right position to engage with you again. But thank you for today. It's been really good, and it'd be great to see you in person in the council chamber, and you know, having you involved in our processes there, sitting at our table. So thank you. All right, can I move to the recommendation that's on the screen, and could I have a hand up, please, to move it? Thank you, Councillor Marshall, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Farm. No hands up's an aye. Hands up's an nay. So there are no nays, so that recommendation is passed. So thank you very much. Thank you. Again, thank you for the participation of members, councillors. Thank you for your patience in terms of getting through this. 2 items have taken us 2 hours, so we've done really well. And we have our next meeting scheduled for the 12th of May. We are at the end, and I will pass to you, Lan, to finish with the Karakia.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you, Peter. This Karakia is about suspending our discussion because we've had so many important issues that are ongoing, and obviously the most important being our relationship with the youth Rōpū. And so we will fetch this conversation at another time, at another place. So ko ka whakairia te karakia. Ka whakairia te kōrero ki te tahu o Ranginui e tu iho nei kia tikina anō a tōna wā, a tōna wahi, haumie, huie, tai kie.
Kia
Kia ora, thank you.
And I think that's our last thing for today, isn't it, guys? And some of us might have something tomorrow, but have a good week. Have a good weekend, and hope to see you COVID-free next week. Ka kitea.
Mō ora koutou.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everybody.